that even though Moses had left Egypt, everybody else was still there and
Hmm.
enslaved, and they were suffering and crying out to God for someone to save them. And the text tells us that their cries reached God, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he was concerned about his people. So we could see that the covenant comes into play because he had told Abraham that his people would be God's people. And so God is in this position of saving his people from extinction. You know, the longer they were there, the less likely they were probably to get out. And so he creates a plan to get them out of enslavement. And this includes Moses, who's pretty happy with his life and probably wasn't so keen on changing his life, right? And you have to ask, like, when that happens to us, when we have a change of location or a big right turn in our life and we become, I don't know, comfortable with it, do we become too comfortable with what we have and where we're at in life?
Yeah, the when I was reading this story and came across it, so I'm just a little over 40 years old. And so
Yeah.
I think about how wild it would be for me to have a complete 180 in my life right now.
Yeah.
Then to move on to that happens again, right? Of another chunk, you have kids, you have a family, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm getting ready just to disappear in obscurity and it's going to be great. And then you're called to do this incredibly hard task. How would I react to all of that? I mean, just even thinking about it made me anxious. I don't know how I would react, but I just know thinking about it, I'm like, I don't want to do any of that.
Well, Moses is 80 years old when he gets called. Um, so he's not a young man, but he lives to 120. And I mean, we might not think of 80 as very robust, but clearly he had to be to do the job he's going to have to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if you think, I mean, just so say he was 60, right? Say he was 55 even, right? Say he was 65, somewhere in there. I mean, so we can understand it through how we view life cycles. That's still insane, right? Like, hey, at 55, I want you to do this complete, at 60, this complete 100-degree 80 different thing. And it sounds scary too. And again, it wasn't like, I don't think the end was completely as clear of how the outcome was going to be as probably it looks like in retrospect.
Well, I think helpfully he had a big conversion moment with God, right? So he's on Mount Horeb. Interesting note that I've actually been there on the top of
Did you
that
see a burning
mountain and
bush?
watched. No, but the burning bush is in St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai
Okay.
Desert. It's actually living, it's thriving, it's doing very well. And it's not
Okay.
on fire anymore. So, is it the same bush? I'm not so sure, but it's definitely memorialized. There's probably always been a bush there since then. So, I want to say that Moses had to have had skills that God really wanted to use. And let's not overlook the fact that when God calls you to do something, he's relying on the skills that you have from your past, right? And you and I talked a little bit about this the other day that we've had big changes in our life, like when I left my business and turned turned the kind of what I thought was the opposite direction and went to seminary thinking I was going to start a second career that was somewhat unrelated to my first career. Like, oh, I'm just going to completely start over. And surprise, surprise, I use so many of the skills from those decades I've spent working in my ministry. So it wasn't a separation and a new start. It was a continuation with a new focus or direction. And I think your story about working and having something come to an end was a good story too. So talk about that event.
Yeah, I mean, I spent my early 20s following what I believed was a call of God, and I thought that was going to be my life, and my path was chunked out, and it was going to be brilliant. It was like everything was working great, and it came crashing down. And I was like, just left like, what was that, right? And you know, what did that accomplish, and what did that do? It wasn't what I thought the outcome was going to be. The goal clearly wasn't I thought what the goal was going to be, but I also can see God's hand in it and Him working in my life in probably ways I had no clue of, setting a foundation to get me further down the road to have a good life.
Yeah, I believe as you get older, like you're 40, I'm older than you. You can look
That's why I love it.
back, just a titch.
It's a couple years.
You can look back and see how God intervenes to make something happen, to put you in a different path.